Hey everyone, my name is Neil and welcome back to my garage, and today we're going to start the build episodes for this new Breadbox I just built. So if you're interested, go ahead and stay tuned. Now, full disclosure, I'd never heard of a Breadbox before my sister brought it to my attention, but once I learned what one was, I was more than excited to start this project. The first thing I did is I modeled this using a design software so that I can get a true visualization and make sure that I showed her so that we were on the same page. Now, once we agreed on the design, the only thing left was for me to go to the hardware store so that we can begin building.
Now that we're back from the hardware store, it's time to build. We picked up some Poplar because that was cheap. That's it. End of story. And times are tough right now, so I'm going to go ahead and flip and look for the best sides of the board and see which one I like. Once I have a side that I've identified to be the outside, I'm going to measure it, I'm going to mark it, and then I'm going to see exactly what it is we need to cut to. All right, as you see there, that piece isn't the best, so we're going to make that the bottom, and then we're going to move our way over to the miter saw, and we're going to cut all the pieces that we need for the top, middle, and bottom. And then we're just going to continue that. Here's a time lapse. Basically, it's the same thing. We're just cutting off the factory edge, and then we're going to measure and cut the pieces that we need to cut. All right, make sure that you wear safety glasses and a mask as there's sawdust all over the place. And now we're going to move back and put back on our tape so that I can label the pieces, make sure they're exactly how I want them to be, because I don't want to get confused. Here's another shot of that so you could see. And then we're going to glue up. So I'm putting tape here so I don't get glue all over the parallel clamp because that's a pain to clean. We're just measuring using every piece that we have because I don't want to make a second trip. So I'm going to put on some wood glue here, and then I'm going to put in clamps. As you notice, I don't have any dowels because this is perfectly strong without the use of dowels. The panels aren't that big and the wood glue is strong enough to hold, and we're going to slow it down right here and just make sure that you take your time. Here we're using pipe clamps because I don't have that many parallel clamps. Here, as you can see, I'm removing as much excess glue as I can now with water so that I don't have to worry about sanding it down later. It's a lot easier to do it now. And here's a visual that you can see of all the panels and the clamps once they're glued up.
Hey everyone, welcome back. It's been 24 hours since we put these panels in the parallel clamps. Typically I like to wait till overnight and then I come back and I take them out of the clamps, but I've done it in as little as 4 hours or 6 hours of drying time, and I've never had a problem with a panel breaking. Let me know down in the comments how long you'd like to let your panels sit in a clamp, and if I'm somewhere in the ballpark. All right, so now we're just gonna go ahead and take these out of the clamps. Let's do that.
All right, so now we're going to take these panels out of the clamps, take your time, and then we're going to look at it, and it came out beautifully. I cannot complain. So now we're going to go back to the miter saw, and we're going to cut the pieces that we need for our sides, basically repeating the same process. Here we're going to be using type on 3 like we were using before. Also, I wanted to note that this is a corner bread box that's going to be 2-tier. It's unlike your usual bread boxes. So it will fit in the corner. You won't be losing space like you would if this were a rectangular one where you had to slant it. It'll fit nicely. So since I've never done this before, all our other pieces were cut, and I figured that this would be a good time to do a mock-up with painter's tape. So enjoy this time lapse while we go through and I put all the pieces together just to make sure we're heading in the right direction.
Hey everyone, it's Neil and welcome back to my garage. I just want to say sometimes it is better to do a mock-up and use tape to make sure that what you're building makes sense. And here I'm just making sure that these angles that I cut make sense, and it looks like it does, so I'll continue on.
All right, now that we know we're heading the right direction, we're going to take this thing apart and we're going to start to glue up. So we're going to sand this down before we glue it up just to make sure, because it's going to be way easier if we do it now before we try to glue these panels. Take your time here. This is a lot of sanding. I think it's well over an hour. So now that we have it sanded, we're going to clean it with a lint-free dust cloth so that we can go ahead and mark our pieces, and we're going to add our polyurethane soon. So I'm just checking to see which side I want to be the interior and exterior, and then checking the plans one more time because I flipped the pieces around. We always make mistakes here. So I'm just putting painter's tape around the areas that I don't want to get polyurethane on, because polyurethane is a plastic and it's going to affect your glue up when you try to glue the pieces together. So this is just a top view of all the pieces and the tape that we put on it. Okay, now it's time to put on my gloves and go through and add polyurethane. Now, I'm going to be doing 3 coats. I'm not going to show all 3 coats, but between each coat, you want to sand the polyurethane down with about 220 or 300 sandpaper, and then you want to come back and clean it again and add more polyurethane. So polyurethane is done, and now we're going to be adding in the holes for our dowels here. I just want to clamp it. As you see, I don't do well clamping, but I make do. And here we're using the Rockler doweling jig. This one's 3/8 since the panels are 3/4 inch thick. And just take your time with this. You don't want a bunch of tear out. So this is sped up, but I am going really slow and it shoots through to the other side. That's fine. You want to clear the chips. And then here we're going to line up the 2 pieces that we're ultimately going to glue together. And we're going to use painter's tape to help with the alignment. As you can see in woodworking, use a lot of painter's tape. This is no exception. So now that we have our 3 pieces, we're just making sure that the joint is crisp. And then we're going to turn it over, and you can see there those holes that we drilled for the dowel. And now we're going to be putting on Type Bond 3 glue. And make sure you put enough on there. I like to put a lot and then wipe it off with water. I know some people don't like to do that because it quote unquote messes with the finish, but for me, I'm not too worried. I'm going to be painting this. And then here you can see. Now, the reason why I'm showing it this way is because I did not know what I was doing. So I cleaned up the glue, and then I realized I didn't have a way to hold this because of the angle. It's a 45-degree angle. So I realized that once I didn't have a choice, I had to hold it. So I'm holding it manually just like this, which is not the best way. I'll show you a second time around how I figured out how to do it without using clamps and my hands as clamps. So now for this piece, we're just putting wood glue on the inner part, and then we're going to knock in the dowel. And then same thing. This is the second process that we're doing, and this one's going to be a lot smoother. I'm going to show you exactly what we do here differently. And once we put our wood glue on, you can see that we're going to use screws, and that's basically the way I was able to get it to work. Was I drilled screws through the holes where the dowels are going to go so that it can hold the 2 pieces together. And then once they were dry, I took the screws out and then put the dowels in. So that's the secret to being able to hold these together. Just use screws and then take them out once it's all dry. Okay, so now that we have both pieces of our corners, we're going to be putting in the center pieces as a test fit for a face frame. Again, I've never done this before, and as you can see there, I made a mistake. So that's why we want to do a dry test fit first, always, just to make sure. And this is going smoothly. So now that I'm happy with that, you can see here I've added glue on the left-hand side, and we are going to be putting this together for real this time. But one thing I want to caution, so you see I'm clumsy there, is that I did make a mistake, and you'll see it here coming up. And this channel is all about showing what's real. And here you can see I put in the right side, not realizing that I now have no way to put in the center piece. And everything looks good until I realize, oh, because the centerpiece has dowels now, I'm going to have to take off the left side. So here you see the left side is gone. Now I'm putting glue on the centerpiece so that we could put that in on the right side, and then we'll come back and have to add it on the left side. So now we're putting the centerpiece on the right side. Good thing I caught that. Had it been another few minutes, then the glue would have dried up and I would have likely messed up the piece, but I caught it just in time. And now here we're gluing the left-hand side again for the second time, and just using water to clean up the glue. It's going to be way easier to do it now than when it gets all dry. It's going to be really hard to sand that down and not mess up the piece. Okay, so the front pieces are all together, the corners and everything. Now we're going to be putting in dowels on the right side so that we can plug those holes. And so just taking my time. This piece took a little bit to get in there, but now it's in. And here is a good visual of what it looks like with all the dowels in there, and everything is drying up. So we're going to leave that for a bit, maybe a few hours, and then come back. All right, so here now we're going to be cutting the dowels. I'm using a pool saw, but you don't have to do that. You can use any saw you want as long as you get it close, and then you can always come back and sand it down. This channel too, I just want to make sure that you don't go out and buy special tools if you don't have to. Any saw will work here. Just get it close, sand it down, and be on your way. All right, so now we're going to be putting our side pieces on, and we're going to be using these 3/4 inch clips that we got from Rockler. They're about $10. And they're great for something like this because they hold the pieces together at 90 degrees and they allow you to check it. They're like a great set of hands and they don't damage the piece at all. So here I'm just doing another dry test fit. I'm checking to make sure that all our joints are good and that this is at the dimensions that I want it to be. Everything appears to look great, but now I have a problem. So I know you can't see my face, but I legit have no clue what to do on the next step, which is why I'm going to take my time. And I've since then figured out the next steps. I'm going to go ahead and take off these clips and mark the pieces. So now we have our panel right here, and we've decided that we're going to drill holes for our screws that we're going to put in there. So we're going to put screws in each panel, attach them to the face frame, and then we're going to come back ultimately after those dry, and we're going to put dowels instead of screws. So I'm just drilling all 3 holes here. And now that we've drilled our holes, I'm going to move the drill out of the way, and then we're going to attach our panels to the face frame. So I'm just checking really quickly, and then we're going to add glue. And we've done this before, just like we did the face frame. So apply your glue. We're using Type on 3 in case you don't remember. And then we're going to brush that on. And then we're going to line these up with our panels. We're doing both sides. And just to note that these panels are not the same size. So you want to make sure that you get the orientation correct because one panel is slightly longer than the other by about an inch. Okay, now we're going to be using those clips again that we got from Rockler to help us align while we put in the screws. And these clips are great. They're about $10. If you don't have them, again, I'd recommend picking them up. And here we have a good amount of glue squeeze out, so I'm pretty happy with that. And here we're going to be connecting the other side just to make sure. We're going to use the clips again. And like I said, these clips come in really good handy, especially when doing something like this. And then we're going to wipe off our excess glue. And now, so we drilled our hole for our panel. Now we're going to be drilling our hole into our face frame just to make sure that that goes well. And we don't have to worry about splitting the wood or anything. So now that we've done that, we're going to insert our trim screws. Again, these are temporary. We're going to come back and insert dowels. All around the box and insert these screws and then be prepared to take them out later. All right, and now that we have all the screws in, we're going to let this dry for a bit, and then we're going to go ahead and work on our next piece. So we're here, we're going to test the top and make sure that it lines up, and then we're going to trace it. So just trying to get the top lined up with the rest of the box. And then right now we're going to be checking for the middle piece, which is why we have the offset, because the middle piece will have to go inside. So we're going to trace it from the inside so that we can go ahead and get the profile that we need in order to cut it. So here I noticed that I was marking along the inside and was touching the polyurethane with the pencil, and we didn't want to do that since we're already done with the inside. So I'm just going to be taking some painter's tape so that when we make our traces, we don't accidentally touch the inside of the box. So now as we remove it, you can see we have a nice profile and it's true to the size of the box. So when we cut it, it should be accurate, and we're just doing that with the other piece as well. So if you can trace, this part shouldn't be that hard, and this profile for the top or the bottom came out really nicely. And now we're going to grab our circular saw and we're just going to cut it. So here's this time lapse. Enjoy it and take your time with this. There's a lot of dust in the air, so make sure you wear a dust mask. And I'm just using this instead of a track saw because it's easier to do. And then we're going to add final touches. And here for this one, I'm going to be using the track saw because this is the inside. So the other one will be cleared with a router. This one I have to do perfectly. So we're going to use the track saw in this case because this is the middle shelf. And if in case you don't have a track saw, you can see right here, I just use a speed square and that gets more or less the same result. So now we're going to try inserting the middle piece into the box. And as you can see, it doesn't fit on the first try. I didn't expect that. So I'm just going to sand it down ever so slightly where it needs to be sanded so that we can get it to fit. Second attempt still did not work. So back to the drawing board, and we're just going to take our time and sand it down. We really want this fit to be nice. And there we go. Looks like we got it to fit perfectly. And then we're just going to be using screws to hold this in place. We're going to use 4 screws, no dowels, because the accuracy is way too high for dowels and I don't want to mess up the piece. And then here we have the other 2 pieces for the bottom and the top that we cut. And as you can see, it's starting to come along nicely and it's actually starting to look like a bread box. So now we're going to work on the doors. We'll move over to that. So we're going to use these 2 popsicle sticks or stirring sticks as spacers for our door. And we're just going to measure so that we can start cutting the pieces. The top and the bottom each have 4 pieces. So that's 8 pieces that we need to cut for the doors. And what I like about this method here is that you don't have to really measure anything. You just put your sticks in the side and then you put your pieces and then you just mark where you need to on the other side so that you can cut that. All right, now here's a time lapse of me putting all 4 pieces for the top door in so that you could see, and hopefully it fits. And once we put in our spacer pieces, you should be able to let it go and that's how you know that you have a nice tight and snug fit. And then I'm going to knock it a little bit just to make sure, and it's good. So now we're going to go ahead and glue up our top door, and we're going to use dowels in order to hold this, but for now we're just going to use glue and clamps. So put a nice amount of glue in there, and then again, you can always wipe that off, but since it's not a high stress application, you don't have to worry about this door going through too much, and it's 3/4 inch just like the rest of the box. All right, now we're going to let that dry for a bit. You see there, it's going to be okay. And then we're going to come back and sand it down. So now after we did that for the top. Next, we're going to move on to where we need to route out for the acrylic. So these are going to have plexiglass in them so that you could see inside the box. So I had to make a jig for the router in order to make that work. So right now I'm just putting down tape because I'm going to be using CA glue to hold it to the jig. We're going to use CA glue to hold it to the jig, and then we're going to take our router and then we're going to route out each piece for our plexiglass. So here you can see the CA glue, and then we're going to spray activator. And if you haven't used CA glue before, it's very helpful, especially when it comes to jigs, because the bond is very strong and it's almost instantaneous. So now you can see here that I'm routing out and using our jig. So you're just going to press until you hit the jig and you're going to go forward. It's kind of freehand kind of jig, but it's working well for me. And then we're going to continue to rotate the piece until we route out all 4 pieces. So here I'm just clearing away debris. And then we turn the piece 90 degrees and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to push it against the jig until we're done. Then we're going to push up till we're about where we want to be and then stop. And then rotate the piece again. So now we're going to use a utility knife to score our glass. And we're going to put that in our bottom door. And as you can see, it fits very well. It's a nice snug fit. And then we're going to hold those with some turn buttons later. But this is good for now. And this is exactly what we wanted. So now that the doors are dry, we need to go ahead and add the dowels so that they can have more rigidity. And we're going to use our doweling jig that we've been using the entire time. This is a 3/8 dowel jig that we got from Rockler. So we're just going to drill out 4 dowel holes, and then we're going to take our dowels and then we're going to add some glue and we're going to put those dowels in the hole. This may be a little bit too much, but it's better to be safe than sorry. And this is just a quick step. And then we're going to use a pull saw and we're going to cut off our dowels. This would be a lot easier if I had a vise on this table, but I don't. So just got to hold it. And then we're going to sand it down so that it's flush. And now we're going to install our knob. So we're going to drill the hole for our knob. And then we're going to take the screw and insert it. We picked up this knob from Home Depot. It was about $2 or $3. And then we're going to put in the plexiglass for the top door just to make sure that everything fits and looks exactly how we want it to. And then we're going to do a test fit of the door into the bread box. And then we're going to take our stick and put it in there as a spacer and check to make sure that the clearances are good. So it looks great to me. I have no issues with this, so I'm ready to move on. And here's what it looks like. Nothing is glued yet. It's just holding in there so we could see. And our door looks good. So now we're going to add our magnets. So we're going to drill our holes for our magnets on both top and bottom, as well as on the doors. So we're going to start with the Breadbox. As you can see in this part, I had to use a 9-degree right angle. And in order to get this to work, I completely forgot to do this before I put the piece on. But no worries, it fits. And as you can see, we're putting the magnet in right now. And then we're going to do the same thing for the door. We're going to drill. We're only drilling about 1/4 of an inch or so because the magnet's not that thick. And then now we're going to move over, and now that's dry, we're going to take out our screws that we put in temporarily, and we're going to replace those with dowels. So same thing, 3/8 dowels, and then we're going to add glue, and we're going to knock our dowels in. The goal is to have this box outlive me, so. And then now we're just going to use our pull saw to cut. So now we're going to use this. I believe there are 9 dowels in total, so we're going to do that. And then we're going to move over to the door and put on our hinges. And we're just going to drill the holes. And then now we have this issue.
Okay, so this is a problem. I have a magnet there and a magnet there, but look what happens when I close it. Okay, so I'm all mic'd up. This is what cost me 2 or 3 days, is the fact that I put the magnets in on the bottom, I put the magnets in on the top. When I tested it, it worked perfectly fine, 100%. And then when I go to actually take off all of the tape and everything and let it go, it either does that, or if it doesn't do that, it sits there and it goes back and forth like it's doing right now. Totally unacceptable. I can't send it out that way. So I ran out of ideas. I didn't want to have to scrap the door, especially since I'm almost done. So the only thing I can think of is to take one of these, and I'm not even sure what they're called, but I needed something that would kind of sit in here nice and flush. So I cut off this piece, which is right here. I sanded it down ever so slightly so it just has a little button. And then I drilled a small hole into the door. And then now when we take that piece that used to be like this, right? And it's a nice, smooth, rounded edge. Put that in there. Now it doesn't bounce back and forth. Totally acceptable. Gonna do the same for the bottom. And really, you're not supposed to let it go. And I imagine once we add paint, it'll give it just a little bit more thickness and that'll stop that completely, and glue as well. But that's it. That's how I figured that out. Don't do as I did, do something else. If I could, I would go back with an offset hinge right there. But again, this button that sits right there now, it looks natural, like it was planned there. And then that's that.
Okay, as you can see, we're all about being real on this channel, but now that the crisis is averted, it's time to put on our bottom piece, and we're going to put glue down, and we're going to use our temporary screws. Again, this will be held with dowels, just like the other pieces were. So we're going to screw this down, and then in order to make it flush, we're going to bust out our router, and we're going to use our flush trim bit. The reason why there's painter's tape around is because I don't want the bit to dig into the wood for the box, so the tape helps with that. This is the only bit that I have, and I'm not going back out to the store to buy another one because it's going to be another 30 bucks. I just want to finish this up. With the router, you want to make sure you take your time and go slow. I believe this footage is actually sped up. Okay, so now that we're going to drill our holes for our feet. So it's good to use a drill bit, even though these screws are only 5/8 inch long, but you want to make sure that you don't crack the wood at this point because you're almost done. Now don't laugh at me, 6 feet was what I ended up coming up with for this box. I tried 4, 3, but this seemed the steadiest, and these aren't very expensive. They're only about 50 cents a piece, and I'm testing it here. It's really sturdy, so I'm happy I went with 6 feet over 3 or 4. I really don't want this thing to tip over. So now that that's done, we can go ahead and take out our screws and start drilling for our dowels. And same thing, we're going to apply glue, enjoy this time lapse, and then we're going to cut these dowels and we're going to sand it down. And as you all know, sanding is my favorite part of woodworking. So now we're just going to test it because it's about done building. And we're going to put in just random pieces into the bread box to test the doors to make sure that they work and everything looks good. So now that that's done, we can go ahead and use polyurethane, which we're going to go with general finish. And then we're just going to go with bare cabinet paint in order to finish this up. Both are in satin. And then we're going to apply 1 coat of primer, 3 coats of paint, and 2 coats of polyurethane. So each time I painted this, it took me about an hour. So if you do the math, I think that's about 6 hours worth of painting. And in between each coat, you want to sand and vacuum the debris off, and then go ahead and prep for another coat of paint. And then here are those buttons that we're going to add in order to retain the plexiglass for the doors. And for this paint, we decided to go with the color Grand Gray. And you can't see my face, but I'm super excited with how this box turned out. I just love it so much. I think I spent about 50 hours on it, and that's all the design work, the painting, the cutting, all of that. It took about 50 hours. And now the last thing we need to do is head over to my sister's place.
All right, as you can see, this bread box holds plenty of bread. It fits in the corner. It's double decker, so that was the emphasis, was to make sure that it fits in the corner. It's double decker, and also it avoids this outlet over here on the left. That was key because they still want to be able to plug things in. So I'm super excited that this is done. She's happy that it's here, and this has been a very fun build. I learned a lot, and I can't wait to build something like this again. As always, let me know down in the comments what you guys liked, didn't like about this video, whether or not you would build something like this for yourself or put something like this in your kitchen, or what you would like to see on a future build. As always, I'm Neil, and I'll see you guys the next time I decide to hit the upload button. Peace.